It has been quite some time since we've had a Madhouse production with a relatively popular IP. I mean, the last popular IP that they produced was, what, 9 years ago? With One Punch Man being that IP that was eventually passed around to JC staff. Now when I heard about this show about an elf girl who was learning how to have connections, I was like, well, cool I guess. Then I heard my friend talk about, saying I should hop on the train. Again, I'll check it out another time. On a whim, one day I decided to just start watching out of the blue, and almost instantly I fell in love. Frieren Beyond Journey's End is a beautiful anime. The story is really good. The show is a slow burn, so it takes some time before the story starts to pick up pace. However, when it picks up pace, you immediately get invested in this beautiful narrative. In most fantasy journey-like shows, they spend the first few episodes recruiting and building the characters to start the journey to kill the Demon King. Frieren, however, is different. The journey is already over. Her party had just beaten the Demon King and were being celebrated as renowned heroes who saved the world. You may think, well, what's the point if there's no fight to be made, or any main quest to complete? Well, I guess we could ask Frieren about that.
人間の寿命は短いって分かっていたのに。なんでもっと知ろうと思わなかったんだろう。
The journey's already over, but what about the end of the journey? The death of Himmel sparks that light into Frieren. She's an elf who probably hasn't even lived a 50th of her life. Time just comes and goes for her, but this time, it was different. It was only a mere 10 years for her out of the literal millennium she lived. But something was different about those 10 years. She isn't close to anyone. She spent 10 years with a party of incredibly unique individuals, one whom was so in love with her. That's what is so intriguing about the narrative. The only thing that was widening the gap between her and her relationships was time and loss. The show is always going back to these themes in between episodes. The time Frieren spent with her comrades, the time it took for Fern to become a proper mage, the time they spent fighting greater demons, the loss of Fern's father figure, Hyder, and the loss of Himmel. The dichotomy of these two themes have with each other is so abundant it's impossible not to mention. Especially when we go back to this sequence, where the only thing standing between her and Himmel is time. I can't put into words the type of show this is. A lot of people online are saying that it's a nice slice of life fantasy-like show, and for the most part, I guess you could say that. I think slice of life doesn't always have to appeal to a modern non-fictional setting like most do. If we're talking about a fantasy slice of life, I'd probably think of Frieren. But at the same time, it isn't really a slice of life type show. It's just a classic fantasy show. That's also got a shonen demographic mixed in with some shoujo. Compared to most other shonen targeted shows, this one in particular stands out the most. A show that isn't there to rush anything, it just stands still and takes its time. You aren't immediately put into one gut-wrenching event after the other. Sure, there are cool battles and tense events, but you have to wait before you get to those points. For the first few episodes, the show focuses on building the environment. Not just the characters, world, and plot, the environment or the feel of the show is the main focus. Hence why I believe it also has a shoujo targeted audience with it. In comparison to shonen, which is a demographic towards young boys from ages 12 to 18, we tend to have our eye caught by power fantasies, superpowers, abilities, and fights. Whilst the shoujo demographic has their eye caught by people, their relationships, and mental challenges. The shoujo demographic will be listed under stories about people and life, whilst the shonen demographic will be listed under stories about the world building, political structures, and loss. With this, you start to understand the type of people you'll be running into as you watch, the trials and tribulations the characters go through, and the gauntlet that Frieren runs with the demons. Yeah, this show is fucking sick. Hey, Future Zor here. I don't really know how to transition into the next section, so... Now this is where we start unpacking things. There are quite an amount of characters that have a lot to unpack other than what is seen on the surface level, but there are two that I specifically want to focus on unpacking. Let's start with a simpler one. Himmel. Despite lacking screen time, Himmel actually plays a pivotal role in the story. The hero who'd slain the Demon King and brought an era of peace to the world. The one whose effect on Frieren was so heavy it made her rethink her life choices and relationships with humans. When you look at Himmel's character, you realize there isn't really anything complicated about him. He's just the classic all-around good guy who saved the world from ruin. No flaws and such a type of guy, you'd say. But it isn't really his character that we would be talking about here, but more so the effect his character had on other people. If there's anything to keep note of, this is a fantasy world. Who knows what type of standards they have here? If anything, it should be known that these types of worlds could have lower standards than the regular modern world in the 21st century. I mean, think about it. They live in this world riddled with genocidal demons, dragons casually flying around villages, and nobles doing God knows what. So looking from their standpoint, Himmel is like this breath of fresh air. He's the one good apple that fell from the tree looking clean and crispy, that has this nice sweet taste you can't get over. Himmel is just great to watch. I always enjoy it when they put him on screen. Even if his screen time is limited, it is always nice to be able to just pick up the apple, knowing you'll enjoy it. Alright, now for the other one. Sari. A character who once again doesn't have as much screen time, yet they have so much to unpack from. Especially Sari. It is common that the elves in Frieren live a very long time. 100,000 years, I believe is how long they live? Don't quote me on that. And due to their long lifespans, it'd be easy to assume that they and connections don't really go hand in hand. Not to mention that elves themselves are so rare. So what's the point in making these connections? What's the point of showing emotion? There is none, right? Might as well deny your emotions over and over again. Never speak your mind and be cold. That's exactly who Sari is. I like to call Sari the tsundere of all time. An elf who only views magic as nothing more than a battle tool. Nothing to create connections, nothing to help people with. Just sit there and blast away through all your mana. She has preached these views on magic whilst constantly contradicting them herself. She goes on and on about how Flam was a failure of a student, and how she didn't live up to her expectations. Yet when she was practically raising Flam, she was always sitting there smiling. Not to mention, every time she's met Frieren, she's always so quick to mention Flam. Deep down, she truly cares about Flam and is proud of the lengths she has brought her. Let's also not forget the fact that when she asked Frieren what her favorite spell was, which was a spell to conjure a field of flowers, she called it stupid and useless. Yet we see her interviewing in a place filled to the brim with flowers. Not to mention how she berates Lernan about how he didn't reach the heights she wished for him to reach, whilst monologuing in her head about how upset and sad it makes her that he could never see the fluctuations in her mana.
結局、あの子にも見えなかったか。私の魔力の揺らぎが。
At the end of the day, she's unintentionally formed connections with the students she's taken on. She's so caught up in her own pretentious views that she fails to acknowledge her own emotions and true feelings. A character who accuses everyone of being too emotional and pessimistic whilst constantly weeping about how she can't spend more time with those around her. See what I'm getting at here? Every accusation comes a contradiction. What am I even saying? It's these factors that make the show shine so brightly. Not to mention its absolutely stellar animation and voice acting, Frieren brings a special experience to us all. If you enjoyed this video, like, dislike, I don't care, just subscribe while you're doing it. It took me a while to come out with another video, and that was mainly due to some writer's block and the hell that is college. I plan on outputting 3 videos a month. I already have about 4 more to write at the moment, and yes, it is surrounding other media as well, not just anime. Please be sure to share. I put a lot of work into this one, and I plan on improving with each video I make.